To understand the kiss that ignited everything, we must return to where it all began. Before the flames, before the chase, there was a single moment, a spark that changed two destinies forever. The Firebird's wings had not yet burned through the night, and the Seeker's heart was still untouched by her light. But fate was already weaving its threads, drawing them together in a dance of desire and danger. To see how passion became legend, and how one kiss defied all reason, we must go back to the very beginning of the Firebird's kiss.
There are nights when the air itself seems to tremble, as though the world is holding its breath between dream and dawn. In such a suspended moment, when silence quivers and the stars lean closer to listen, the story of the Firebird begins. It is not born from fire alone, but from longing. The ache of creation's first sigh, when light desired to touch darkness, and both discovered the heat of existence. From that union rose a being woven of flame and melody, a creature whose feathers shimmer with every hue of yearning. The Firebird, they call it, a whisper, a promise, a perilous beauty that dances forever at the edge of vision. Those who have glimpsed her wings say that they blaze with more than light. They burn with memory. The reds are not merely crimson, but the blush of the first kiss ever stolen beneath the sky. The golds are not merely gold, but the warmth of hands meeting across lifetimes. And within her eyes, they claim, lie reflections of every heart that has ever dared to love too deeply. Yet her beauty is not gentle, it devours. To behold her is to remember everything one has ever desired and everything one must lose to touch it. Long ago, before kingdoms rose and oceans learned to speak, there was a realm that shimmered halfway between waking and sleep. The trees whispered songs of longing, and rivers carried secrets in their currents. The people of that land lived quietly, knowing that beauty was sacred and desire dangerous. But on certain nights, when the veil between worlds grew thin and the air filled with the scent of distant fire, they would gather in silence, eyes fixed on the horizon. Somewhere beyond the forest, a light would flicker. A song would drift through the dark, soft, trembling, irresistible. It was said that the Firebird was passing, brushing her wings against the fabric of the world, leaving trails of heat that lingered on the skin like unspoken love.
None knew where she came from. Some said she was the soul of the first flame, forever seeking its reflection. Others whispered that she was born from the tears of a goddess who had loved the sun too fiercely. But all agreed on one thing: to find her was to be undone. Those who chased her were never the same again. Some returned with eyes that no longer recognized the mortal world. Others vanished into light, leaving only the faint scent of ash and roses behind. And yet every generation Someone would go searching. It was never duty or greed that drove them. It was desire, a longing too deep to name, a hunger for something beyond the horizon of touch and breath. For to hear her song once was to feel it coil inside the heart, a melody that would never fade. The Firebird did not call with words, she called with warmth, with the whisper of light against skin, with the promise that somewhere in her radiance lay the answer to every unspoken yearning. The legend says she nests in the heart of twilight, where the sun's last kiss lingers upon the clouds before surrendering to night. There, amid the glow of fading gold, she folds her wings and dreams of the world below. When she dreams, sparks fall from her feathers, descending through the sky like tears of flame. Where they land, flowers bloom, even in winter, their petals trembling with heat and scenting the air with something both sweet and forbidden. Lovers who meet under those petals are said to feel the Firebird's breath upon their skin, as if blessing them and warning them. For beauty borrowed from her realm always demands a price. Once, it is told, the Firebird grew restless. She looked upon the earth and saw shadows moving through fields of frost, eyes dulled by the slow forgetting of wonder. They no longer looked to the stars, nor listened for songs beyond the wind. Pity stirred within her, pity and something like loneliness. For though she was flame, she longed to be touched. Though she was eternal, she envied those who could burn and fade. And so she descended, her wings trailing embers that painted the night in rivers of gold. The sky itself seemed to sigh as she passed. Those who saw her that night spoke of a vision so exquisite it ached to remember. Her body was slender as smoke, her movements fluid as candlelight in a lover's room. Feathers shimmered between scarlet and silver, each one breathing like a heartbeat. Her song was soft, a hum of sorrow and seduction, weaving through the dark like the memory of warmth in a cold bed. When she touched the ground, the grass beneath her feet turned to glass, and the earth sighed with both joy and fear.
They say the Firebird's presence was not merely seen, it was felt, deep and intimate, like a pulse against the soul. Those who beheld her felt the boundaries between their bodies and the air dissolve. It was as though the world itself leaned closer, trembling in the presence of something it both desired and feared to understand. For she was not of the mortal plane. She was the embodiment of the moment before surrender, the breath that trembles before a kiss, the light that knows it will burn out but shines anyway. There were few who dared approach her, and fewer still who survived her gaze. For the Firebird did not mean to harm, yet her beauty consumes as flame consumes the wick. It could not help but devour what it touched. Those who reached for her found their hearts ignited, their souls set alight with visions of endless desire. They saw not just her wings, but the secret within them. The knowledge that every act of love is also an act of loss. And still, they reached. Because to see the Firebird was to feel alive, to feel every forgotten spark of passion and ache, to remember that love is not safe, that beauty is not kind, and that longing, when deep enough, can rewrite the soul. Over time, her name became a song whispered through generations, a lullaby and a warning. Mothers sang it to their children as the fire crackled low, their voices trembling with both fear and wonder. They told them of the creature of flame who carried the world's forgotten dreams in her wings, who appeared only to those brave or foolish enough to love beyond reason. Some said she was a messenger of the gods, others swore she was the god, the pulse of creation itself. And yet, the Firebird remained elusive, seen only in the briefest of glimpses, the shimmer of gold behind a storm cloud, the flicker of warmth in winter's breath, the sigh that escapes when a heart remembers something it cannot name. Her myth spread across lands and centuries, transforming but never fading, because every soul that yearned for something impossible carried her echo within. It is said that even now, when the world sleeps and the moon spills silver across the earth, she still flies, unseen yet felt. Her wings brush against dreams of those who ache for connection, for the divine touch that blurs the line between pleasure and pain. And somewhere someone always hears her song, a soft hum at the edge of consciousness, a spark that flares in the dark heart of longing. It calls not to the wise nor the faithful, but to those who still dare to believe that desire itself is sacred. For the Firebird does not promise happiness, she promises awakening. She is the first flame, the last sigh, the eternal dance of light and shadow. To seek her is to be burned. To touch her is to understand the beauty of being consumed. And to remember her, even in whispers, is to keep alive that fragile, glorious ache that makes us human, the desire to reach for something brighter than we can hold, knowing it will leave us in ashes, and still reaching anyway.
He was not born with greatness, nor marked by prophecy. His name has long been lost to time, but those who speak of him call him the Seeker. He was a wanderer of quiet soul and restless heart, a man whose gaze often drifted toward horizons as though searching for something that shimmered just beyond sight. His village lay nestled in a valley of mist, where dawn was slow to rise and night reluctant to leave, and yet, even among such silences, he could not find peace. There was always a hunger in him, a pulse beneath the skin that beat to a rhythm he did not understand. He was neither young nor old, but carried the weariness of one who had loved and lost too deeply. His hands bore calluses from work, his eyes a faint glimmer of old tenderness. He had known warmth once, perhaps love, but those memories were like ashes scattered to wind. What remained was the ache, the unending ache that no mortal touch could soothe. And so he walked beneath skies heavy with dreams, until one night the forest began to glow. He felt it before he saw it, the heat faint at first, then rising like a blush spreading through the air. The scent of burning amber drifted through the trees, mingled with something alive and sweet. The night itself seemed to tremble, the shadows swaying as though drawn to a hidden song. He stopped breathing. The world held still, and then, between the trunks of sleeping birches, he saw her, the Firebird. She was smaller than he imagined, and infinitely more terrible. Her form shimmered between woman and flame, her feathers cascading like molten silk. Each movement left ripples in the dark, threads of light that clung to leaves and bled into the soil. Her face, if it could be called that, was both fierce and tender, sculpted from the same fire that gives dawn its first blush. Her eyes were the color of desire itself, gold trembling on the edge of red. For a moment, he could not tell if she was truly there or a reflection of the flame that burned within his own heart. Yet the air between them shimmered with heat, and he felt the pulse of her existence on his skin, the way one feels the closeness of a storm before it breaks. The Firebird regarded him not as a stranger, but as one expected. She tilted her head, and light dripped from her hair like rain. Her wings folded softly behind her, each feather flickering between solid form and smoke. When she breathed, the world around her glowed. When she moved, the darkness sighed.
He tried to speak, but no words came. She was beauty uncontained, and yet there was sorrow in her stillness, a loneliness vast enough to swallow stars. The seeker took a single step forward. The ground beneath him warmed, grass bending as though bowing to her presence. Her gaze followed him, unblinking, filled with curiosity that burned more than it soothed. For the first time, she saw in a mortal what she had never seen in gods: vulnerability unarmored by divinity. And he saw in her not just light, but longing. Not just flame, but the fragile shadow within it. It was as if they had met before, in some forgotten lifetime, across a boundary neither could cross. Recognition bloomed between them, like fire meeting air. She lifted a hand, or perhaps a wing. It was hard to tell where feathers ended and flesh began. And the light shifted, bathing him in warmth. His skin prickled. Every breath became a confession. The heat that poured from her was not the burn of destruction, but the ache of awakening. He wanted to fall to his knees. He wanted to reach for her, though he knew it would mean ruin. The stories echoed in his mind. To touch her is to vanish, to be consumed, to become nothing but song and smoke. Yet even as fear whispered in his chest, another voice, ancient and reckless, rose to meet it. It told him that perhaps there was no greater fate than to be undone by beauty. The Firebird stepped closer. Her feet left no mark upon the earth. Instead, the ground glowed where she passed, as if blessed by her sorrow. The air shimmered, wrapping around them like invisible silk.
Her light painted his face in gold and crimson, revealing every quiet truth he carried. She looked at him, and something shifted within her, a flicker of confusion, almost human. For ages she had flown above mortal desires, watching them burn and fade, but never feeling their pull. Now, standing before this man whose eyes held no fear, she felt the echo of something forbidden stir in her chest. He did not worship her. That startled her most. Others had fallen prostrate at her light, begging for blessings, but he stood there, silent, trembling, and simply looked. Not at her wings, not at her fire, but at her as one might look upon another soul. It was the first time anyone had ever seen her not as divinity, but as being. She felt exposed beneath his gaze. The flames around her dimmed slightly, the gold deepening into a softer hue, like embers breathing between heartbeats. The night air cooled enough for him to take another step. The distance between them thinned to a breath. "Are you real?" he whispered, the words trembling as though afraid of their own sound.
The Firebird tilted her head, the corners of her lips curving into something that might have been a smile or sorrow. Her answer was not in words, but in movement. She extended her hand, fingers of light reaching toward his chest, stopping just before they touched. Heat radiated between them, a living pulse that made the world flicker. The seeker closed his eyes, certain that even this nearness would unmake him. But she did not burn him. Instead, the warmth sank into him like sunlight beneath the skin, seeping into every hollow space he'd carried through years of wandering. He felt her presence curl around his heartbeat, and for a moment the ache inside him was silent. When he opened his eyes, she was studying him closely. There was a question in her gaze, a question she did not know how to ask. Perhaps it was, "Why do you not fear me?" Or perhaps, "Will you still reach for me, knowing what I am?" He could not tell, but he understood. And in that understanding, something fragile was born. The Firebird's feathers trembled, shedding faint motes of light that drifted toward him. They brushed his face like falling petals, and each touch left a whisper of warmth, a memory of forgotten tenderness. He reached out a hand, slowly, reverently, and though he dared not touch her, his fingers hovered close enough to feel the hum of her existence. It was a moment suspended outside of time, the meeting of longing and radiance, of man and myth. Around them the forest held its breath. Even the stars dimmed as if unwilling to intrude upon the silence between them. She leaned closer, her eyes searching his. The scent of her, wild, sweet, and smoky, filled his lungs until he could taste the edge of her light. He knew, without needing to be told, that this was not merely a meeting, it was an invitation. The Firebird's wings unfurled slowly, each feather catching the moonlight, scattering it in shards of gold. Her voice, when it came, was softer than flame, deeper than wind. "You should not have found me." Her words carried no threat, only truth, yet within that truth was an ache that mirrored his own. He smiled faintly, as if recognizing something sacred in her warning, and yet, he murmured, "I think I have been searching for you my whole life." She stared at him, and for the first time in eternity the Firebird felt her fire falter. Not extinguished, but transformed. The flame within her no longer raged to consume, but flickered gently, yearning to touch without harm. It frightened her. It thrilled her too. For in that moment, standing before the seeker who dared to meet her eyes, the Firebird understood that divinity, no matter how radiant, is incomplete without the ache of mortal desire. And he, mortal though he was, felt himself illuminated by something eternal, something both terrible and beautiful. And so, in the hush of that first encounter, the world itself seemed to pulse between them. Two beings drawn together by forces older than stars, each mirroring in the other the secret truth of longing, that even light desires to be held, and even flesh longs to burn.
The nights that followed were no longer still. The seeker could not sleep nor dream, for his mind burned with the image of her wings. He wandered the forest each dusk, drawn by the memory of that light, by the warmth that still lingered in his veins. He did not call her name, he did not dare, but the longing within him was a summons all the same. The air seemed to know it, trembling with unseen fire, whispering the sound of wings somewhere beyond reach. When she came again, it was not with thunder or song, but silence. The Firebird appeared at the edge of the lake, her reflection trembling on the water like a memory afraid to exist. The moonlight touched her feathers, and the world turned gold around her. She did not look at him at first. She seemed lost in thought, as though even flame could doubt its right to burn. He stepped closer, barefoot on the wet grass, and every motion felt both sacred and forbidden. "You came back," he murmured. Her gaze met his, slow and luminous. "I never left," she said softly. "You carry me in your chest now. Every mortal who sees me burns with a fragment of my light. You should have known this before you sought me." "I didn't seek you," he said, though his voice betrayed him. "I was found." A faint smile curved her lips, though her eyes remained unreadable. "And you will do what with what you found? You are bound to me now, as flame is bound to air. Touch too deeply, and you will vanish into what you love." He should have turned away. Her warning was clear, her words heavy with divine law. Yet something within him rebelled, a hunger that no logic, no fear could extinguish. "Then let me vanish," he whispered. "Let me know what it is to be part of your light, even if it ends me." Her feathers flared, startled by the force in his voice. Heat rippled through the air, and for a moment her beauty became unbearable. "You speak of ruin as though it were a gift," she said, her tone trembling between anger and sorrow. "Do you not understand? The gods curse those who would bridge our realms. To love me is to defy the order of creation." He took another step, and the water lapped at his feet. "And yet you stand here," he said, "you who were never meant to descend, you who longed to be seen. Perhaps you defy them too." Her eyes darkened. A spark of fear, or was it desire, flickered within them. "You know nothing of what I long for." "I know enough," he replied. "I see it in your silence. You envy the living. You envy what dies."
The word struck like a blade of truth, and she turned from him sharply, her wings unfurling in a surge of gold. The heat from her body sent ripples across the lake. "You dare name the hunger of a god?" she said, her voice low, almost human in its trembling. He moved closer still, his breath catching in the air that shimmered between them. "No," he said, "I name the hunger of something that feels." The Firebird's light wavered, the fire around her flickered uncertainly, as though struggling against a wind that came from within. For the first time, her divinity faltered before something she could not burn away. She turned back to him, and her face softened. "You are reckless, mortal. You stand before what was never meant to be touched, and yet you reach as though the fire will bend to your desire." "Maybe it will," he said quietly. "Maybe the fire has been waiting for someone who would not bow before it." The air between them throbbed with heat. Each breath they shared carried the weight of every unspoken thought, the pull of forbidden touch, the ache of knowing that to love her was to wound the balance of heaven itself. She stepped forward, her light dimming to a tender glow. "You do not know what it means to love something eternal. It is to love without hope of being held, to burn forever and never be consumed." He looked at her as though her pain were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Then let me be the one who dares to hold the impossible." Her wings trembled, a sound escaped her throat, not quite a sigh, not quite a sob. "You cannot," she whispered. "I am bound by flame, you by flesh. If we touch beyond what fate allows, the world will break." "Then let it break." The words hung in the air like a spell. For a heartbeat, the world truly seemed to shatter, light bending, time pausing, the silence between them thick as smoke. The Firebird looked at him, and what she saw there terrified her. It was not worship, but love. Love unafraid of destruction. Love that sought no reward but the burning itself. And within her something ancient shifted. She had always been flame, the giver of warmth, the taker of life. But never had she wanted. The gods had made her beautiful but empty, radiant but untouched. Now, standing before this mortal who defied fear for the sake of feeling, she began to understand the curse of her own perfection. Her hand rose again, trembling with light. She touched his face, barely, her fingers grazing his skin like a whisper of heat. The contact sent to shiver through him, equal parts pleasure and pain. His heart raced, his breath shallow, the air thick with the scent of burning rain.
He closed his eyes, letting her warmth seep into him. Every nerve in his body came alive. He could feel her sorrow,
her solitude, her unbearable brilliance. He wanted to speak, to tell her that she was not alone, but words were too fragile for what pulsed between them. When he opened his eyes, her own were wide and wet with reflected flame. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. "Now the fire knows your name." He smiled faintly, though his chest ached. "Then let it remember me kindly." She withdrew her hand, the light flickering between them like the heartbeat of something dying. "You do not understand what you have awakened. The laws that keep worlds apart are not kind. I cannot choose you." "But your heart already has," he said. The words broke her. Her wings flared open, gold bleeding into crimson. Around them, the forest began to glow with unnatural light. Leaves curled from heat, the water hissed with steam, and the stars themselves seemed to turn away. She stepped back, trembling. "You are fire now," she said, her voice trembling. "You carry my warmth. It will burn in you until you can no longer bear it. That is the punishment for loving me." He reached out one last time, his hand hovering in the air where she had stood. "Then let it burn," he whispered. "Better the agony of fire than the silence of never having known it." Her expression softened, torn between pity and awe. "You do not fear damnation." He shook his head. "Only emptiness." The Firebird's light dimmed, her glow turning to embers. "Then you will learn what it means to love something that cannot stay." Her wings unfurled in a sudden blaze. Heat washed over him like a wave, and she rose into the air, her form dissolving into 1,000 fragments of gold. He watched as her light faded into the night, his heart burning with both wonder and pain. When the last ember vanished, the seeker fell to his knees, the earth still warm beneath him. His chest glowed faintly, a small pulse of fire beneath his skin, a gift, or perhaps a curse. He pressed a trembling hand to his heart and felt her there, alive, in the rhythm of his breath. And as the night closed in, he whispered into the darkness, not knowing if she could still hear him. "If love is sin, then let me sin beautifully."
Nights bled into one another, each one a slow burning toward inevitability. The seeker no longer returned to his village. The world of men had grown distant, unreal. The only truth he knew now was the memory of her light pulsing beneath his skin, a warmth that both sustained and devoured him. The mark she had left on his heart glowed faintly in the dark, a secret flame that refused to die. He wandered until the forest thinned into an expanse of starlit fields where silence hung heavy and expectant. There he felt her presence again, not seen, not heard, but felt, like the first breath before a storm. The air shimmered, the wind carried a low hum, a sound between song and heartbeat. And then she was there, descending from the dark like dawn breaking through eternity. The Firebird's wings unfurled across the night, spilling light that danced over the grass and rippled across the sky. Her beauty was unbearable now,
not a vision to be admired, but an experience that consumed. She was every warmth he had ever longed for, every pain he had ever feared, gathered into one living flame. When her feet touched the earth, the ground itself seemed to sigh and surrender. He fell to his knees, not in worship, but in wonder. She approached him slowly, her radiance soft, tender, almost human. For a long time they simply looked at each other, two souls trembling between defiance and fate. Then she spoke, her voice the sound of fire breathing. "You are dying," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "If this is death, it is beautiful." "You cannot bear my heat much longer," she said. "Already it feeds on you." "Then let it finish. If burning is the price for knowing you, I will pay it willingly." The Firebird's gaze faltered. She wanted to turn away, to keep the distance that divinity demands, yet the pull between them had grown unbearable. Her fire was no longer content to shine above. It longed to touch, to be known, to be felt. She reached for him, her fingers trembling with light, and she said softly, "If I touch you now, you will not survive it."
"Then touch me," he breathed. "Let the world end in light." For an endless heartbeat she hesitated. Then she closed the space between them. Her hand met his chest, and the world ignited. The flame did not consume, it transformed. It poured through him in waves, a symphony of sensation that blurred the boundary between pleasure and agony. Heat spiraled through his body, filling every hollow space with brightness, as though the fire sought to replace his very blood with light. He gasped, his breath mingling with hers, his heartbeat echoing the rhythm of her wings. Their bodies did not touch in the way mortals touch. Flesh could not contain what passed between them. Instead, their forms merged through radiance, light folding into shadow, fire sinking into flesh. The seeker's veins glowed like molten rivers. Her feathers turned translucent, their colors deepening into shades unseen by human eyes. It was not love as mortals know it. It was surrender, the collapse of boundaries, the yielding of self to something vast and infinite. Every heartbeat was a prayer, every breath a confession. He felt himself unravel, and yet he had never been more whole. The Firebird's light pulsed with his own, their rhythms aligning, their breaths fusing into one trembling exhale. Around them, the night dissolved into gold. Trees shimmered, the air thickened with warmth, and even the stars seemed to bow, dimming their cold brilliance before this union of flame and flesh. Her wings closed around him, a cocoon of fire and light. Within their glow, time ceased to move. He could no longer tell where his body ended and hers began. He was within her, and she within him, their essences braided in a single luminous thread. She leaned close, her voice a whisper against his soul. "Do you feel it?" "Yes," he gasped. "You?" "No," she said, her breath trembling. "Us." The sound of her word broke something open inside him. The heat surged higher, fierce and tender all at once. He cried out, not in pain, but in revelation.
Every nerve, every thought, every shadow within him was illuminated. He saw the world as she saw it, not as matter, but as music. Every star was a heartbeat. Every breath was creation.
Her song began then, a low, resonant hum that filled the air with light. It vibrated through his bones, through the soil, through the pulse of existence itself. It was a song of life and death, of desire too vast for language. It was the hymn of all things that burn. As she sang, tears, made of molten gold, fell from her eyes. They struck his skin and sizzled into warmth. "I was not made to love," she whispered, "but now I cannot unlearn it." He reached for her face, his hand glowing with borrowed light. "Then let us unmake the world together." Her laughter came soft, like wind through fire. "It would be beautiful," she said, "and terrible." Their foreheads met. For a moment they were still, two sparks balanced on the edge of eternity. Then the flame erupted. The world became brilliance. The air cracked open, trembling with light so pure it was soundless. His body arced within her radiance, and she screamed, not in pain, but in ecstasy too vast for form. Fire swept outward, devouring the field, the forest, the sky. Yet nothing was destroyed. Everything simply became. The seeker saw himself dissolving, his flesh melting into beams of gold. But instead of fear, he felt release. To burn was not to die, it was to return to the essence of things. His last sight of her was not as a goddess of flame, but as a woman of sorrow and grace, eyes filled with both love and loss. She caught him as he fell, not his body, but his light. She drew it into herself, pressing his radiance to her heart, where it mingled with her own. Her song rose higher, trembling, breaking, as though the act of loving him had torn the boundaries of her being apart. When the blaze subsided, she knelt amid the embers. The air shimmered with afterglow, the ground warm beneath her feet. The seeker was gone, but the light within her burned brighter than ever before, soft, golden, human. She looked at her hands, now streaked with mortal warmth, and whispered his name like a prayer. "I warned you," she murmured to the wind, "but you came anyway." The night was quiet. Only the faint echo of her song lingered, woven into the air like breath against skin. She lifted her wings, and for the first time their fire burned not only with divine brilliance, but with something new, something fragile and real. Before she rose, she pressed a glowing feather to the earth where his body had once lain. From that spot, light began to grow, slow, steady, alive. It spread through the field, soft as dawn, until the night was painted in the same warmth that had once existed between them. Then she took to the sky, trailing gold behind her, her wings heavy with memory. And though she soared higher, her heart remained bound to the mortal she had loved, the one who had dared to touch the untouchable.
High above the world, the Firebird sang again, her voice trembling with both joy and grief. It was no longer the song of a goddess, but of a woman who had learned the sweetness of pain, the holiness of desire. Each note was a flame, each silence a kiss never forgotten. And below, in the gentle glow of her passing, the world bloomed anew, proof that even fire, when touched by love, can create instead of destroy. When the fire at last surrendered to dawn, the world lay quiet beneath a sky washed pale with gold. The forest that had once burned with her descent now shimmered in silence, its trees crowned not in flame but in tender light. Ashes carpeted the ground like snow, yet from beneath them life began to stir, tiny green shoots reaching toward the warmth that lingered in the air. It was as if the earth itself remembered her touch and refused to mourn. The seeker's body was gone, reduced to dust and radiance, but his essence had not vanished. The Firebird carried it within her, a pulse of human warmth that refused to fade. She could feel him even now, humming softly beneath her breastbone, shaping her light into gentler hues. He had become a part of her fire, changing it forever. The Firebird hovered over the fields of new growth, wings unfolding like sunrise. The air trembled with her presence, yet she no longer burned with the same fierce brilliance. Her light had softened. It no longer sought to blind, only to illuminate. She had become something neither divine nor mortal, something born between, a being touched by longing. She gazed at the place where he had fallen. The soil there glowed faintly, golden as honey, alive with warmth that never cooled. Every breeze carried his whisper, a breath of awe, of surrender, of endless love. "You are still here," she murmured, her voice breaking. "Even the fire cannot take you from me." The world seemed to listen. Somewhere far off, a river caught her reflection, and the water shimmered red and gold. The Firebird's tears fell into it, and where they touched, the current brightened, carrying fragments of her sorrow through the veins of the earth. Her grief became a gift, a reminder that even loss, when born of love, could nourish creation. She rose higher, feeling the wind curl through her feathers. The sky stretched wide before her, vast and empty. She had flown this expanse countless times, but never had it felt so hollow. The stars, once her companions, seemed dim and distant now. Their cold light no longer satisfied her. For the first time in eternity, the heavens felt lonely.
She remembered the way he had looked at her, not with reverence, but with wonder. No prayer, no fear, only raw, unguarded desire to understand. That gaze had pierced through her divinity and found the woman beneath the flame. It had been both her undoing and her salvation. She carried that memory as she flew toward the horizon. Each wing beat sent ripples of light through the clouds, and where they passed, rain began to fall. Warm, golden rain that kissed the ground and made the fields bloom in impossible colors. Flowers of crimson and amber opened where the drops landed, their petals glimmering as though touched by fire. Mortals who later found them would call them the Seeker's blossoms, believing they grew where love had burned purest. As she drifted across the sky, she felt her strength fading. The fire within her flickered, not from weakness, but from change. Divinity was slipping away, replaced by something far more fragile. She wondered if this was what mortality felt like, the sweetness of impermanence, the ache of every breath. She found solace in it. At last, she came to rest atop a mountain peak, where the clouds brushed her wings like whispers. The world stretched endlessly below, glowing with new life. She folded her wings and closed her eyes. The silence was complete, yet within it she could still hear him, his laughter, his breath, the echo of his final words. Let the world end in light. And it had. But now, from that ending, another world had begun. The Firebird's feathers dimmed to soft gold, her fire cooling into a warm glow. She no longer blazed, she shone. Around her, the wind carried the scent of rain and ash. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the thin air. A woman cloaked in twilight, neither goddess nor ghost. She spoke to the wind as though to him. You changed me. You made me remember what it is to feel. The wind answered in warmth, brushing against her cheek like a kiss. For the first time, she smiled without sorrow. Below, humans began to stir from their dreams, awakened by the glow that lingered across the land. They would speak of that night for generations, how the heavens had burned, how the dawn had arrived too soon, and how from the ashes came flowers that sang faintly when touched by light. They would tell their children of the Firebird who loved a mortal and vanished with him into fire, leaving beauty in her wake.
But none would know the truth of what she felt in that final moment, the peace that came from surrendering eternity for a single heartbeat of understanding. The Firebird lifted her gaze to the rising sun. Its warmth caressed her face, and she felt no pain, only kinship. For the first time, the light did not rival hers, it completed her. She spread her wings once more, not to ascend, but to dissolve into the dawn. Her feathers scattered like embers, falling gently toward the earth, each one carrying a fragment of her light. When the last feather touched the ground, the Firebird was gone. Yet everywhere she had passed, the world shimmered softly. Rivers sparkled with gold, trees whispered with warmth, and hearts that wandered through the forest felt a strange, tender heat rise within them, a yearning for something they could not name. In that warmth, her presence lived on. The Seeker, too, was not lost. His essence flowed through the world she had touched, through the blossoms, through the rain, through every flicker of dawn. When lovers met beneath those glowing petals, they felt an ancient fire awaken in their veins, the echo of a passion that once defied the heavens. And somewhere in the hush between stars, two lights danced together still, one soft and golden, one bright as flame. They circled one another endlessly, never colliding, never fading. Their rhythm was the heartbeat of the world, the pulse of desire, loss, and rebirth. From that rhythm, life continued. The Firebird's song, now scattered through creation, sang silently in every act of love, every spark of courage, every surrender to beauty. What had begun as destruction became creation. What had burned became light. Thus the myth endured, not as tragedy, but as testament, that to touch the divine is to risk annihilation, yet through that annihilation the world becomes more alive. And so when the wind rises at dusk and the horizon glows with impossible warmth, people still look to the sky and whisper her name. They say that if you listen closely, you can hear the faint flutter of wings and a voice carried through the clouds, murmuring like fire against skin. Nothing truly burns away, it only changes its shape.
The legend says that when the Firebird vanished, the air itself sighed, and for a moment the world forgot how to breathe. Silence settled over the forest and the fields, a hush so profound it felt sacred, as though the earth itself were holding its breath in reverence. But within that quiet, something remained, something delicate, luminous and eternal, the memory of flame, soft and patient, like the aftertaste of light on the tongue, or the gentle warmth left behind by a long vanished hand. The earth no longer burned, yet her presence lingered in subtle ways, in the trembling of leaves at dawn, in the shimmer of rivers beneath the rising sun, in the faint gold that clung to the petals of the seeker's blossoms. The warmth of her touch endured. Those who walked among them could feel it, a pulse beneath the soil, steady as a heartbeat, reminding them that even what seems lost continues to live, hidden and patient, waiting to reveal itself anew. Time passed, and the myth became story, then song. The words changed, the faces of those who told it blurred with the passing years, but the essence remained, a mortal who reached for the divine, a goddess who chose to feel, and the fire that became their bond. Children listened with wide-eyed rapts, elders whispered with knowing smiles, and lovers traced each other's skin in candlelight, sensing something they could not name, a trace of warmth that belonged to another world. Yet what was the truth beneath the story? Perhaps it was never about gods or man at all, but about the hunger that lives in all things, the yearning to touch what cannot be held, to feel the impossible. Desire is the oldest force in the universe, older than stars, older than wind, older than the beating of the human heart. It is the motion that makes light travel, that draws the tide to the shore, that compels the soul to reach for something just beyond its grasp. The Firebird and the Seeker
were mirrors of this eternal hunger, reflecting its beauty, its danger, its sublime impossibility. Their love was never meant to last in flesh or flame. It existed to remind the world that beauty is brightest when it trembles on the edge of loss. Perfection is unbearable. Only when it falters, when it risks vanishing, does it become divine. The Firebird burned not to destroy, but to reveal the fragility of longing, the holiness of surrender. In her touch, passion and sorrow became one, and the seeker found eternity not in possession, but in surrender, in letting go.
Even now, centuries later, the echoes of that encounter can be traced in the smallest things. The gentle warmth of a sunrise on a winter morning, the tremor in the air before rain, the fleeting shimmer of light on a river at dusk, all carry her memory. They speak of longing and of love, of a connection so vast that it cannot be bound by form, time, or flesh. The world itself seems to pulse with this hidden light, a quiet reminder that fire, once felt, never fully dies. The seeker, too, did not vanish. Though his body was consumed by brilliance, his essence became part of the rhythm of the world she had touched. A pulse of warmth that flows through rivers and winds, through the rhythm of hearts that dare to hope. His courage, his longing, his reckless devotion are remembered in the bloom of flowers that grow from ashes, in the golden glimmer of dawn on winter leaves, in the sparks of love that ignite suddenly, unexpectedly, in the hearts of strangers. He became proof that mortality can brush eternity, not through conquest, but through surrender, through the willingness to burn without fear. And the Firebird herself changed. No longer an untouchable flame, she carries within her the softness of mortal warmth. The fire in her wings no longer consumes all it touches. It illuminates gently, a light that reveals rather than blinds, that warms rather than scorches. She learned that to love is not to destroy, that surrender does not weaken, and that the ache of impermanence is itself a kind of beauty. Her flight across the sky leaves traces that bend the light and make the world seem softer, more alive, as if every shadow holds a memory of what once burned brightly. Sometimes, in the hush of evening, when the horizon is brushed with amber and violet, the wind carries a faint echo of her song. It is not loud, not demanding, not even fully comprehensible. It is a tremor in the air, a pulse in the heart, a whisper across skin that has been kissed by warmth. She sings of longing, of the sweetness of impermanence, of the way every spark must eventually return to the world and yet leave its mark. Her voice trembles with joy and sorrow intertwined, a melody that reminds those who hear it that every ending is also a beginning, that every loss is sacred, and that every fleeting moment can contain eternity. Her gift was not immortality. It was awareness, the knowledge that to truly love, to truly feel, is to risk everything, yet to gain the world within a single heartbeat. The myth endures not because she is eternal, but because her fire is remembered in every act of courage, every surrender to beauty, every embrace of fleeting joy. Desire, even when it hurts, is holy. Loss, even when it scars, is luminous. And the world is made richer by the echoes of both. The Firebird's wings, once blazing with uncontainable light, now leave trails that shimmer softly in the night sky. Those who look upon them feel a sudden warmth, a stirring of the heart, a gentle ache of recognition, though they cannot name its source. Perhaps they imagine love, perhaps they feel longing, perhaps they sense the presence of something divine passing silently above. This is her gift, to remind all who watch, all who live, all who dare to dream that nothing truly ends, that every flame leaves a trace, that every heart touched by fire is changed forever. And so we, who live in the span of her heartbeat, carry her light within us. It is in the breath between two lovers, in the trembling of a child reaching for the unknown, in the quiet moments when we dare to hope for the impossible. Her warmth is everywhere, gentle yet insistent, asking us only to remember that life is fleeting, that passion burns briefly, and that loss is inseparable from beauty. When night falls and the stars tremble in the sky, we can still hear her whisper. It is softer than any song, lighter than air, and yet it lingers in the soul. A breath of warmth across skin, a fluttering of wings just beyond sight. It tells us that desire is sacred, that impermanence is not cruel, that the act of feeling, truly feeling, is the closest we come to touching the divine. So when the sun dips low, painting the world in gold and amber, and the wind rises with a hush over fields and rivers, we remember. We remember the seeker who dared to reach for the untouchable. We remember the Firebird who burned and softened and became something entirely new. We remember that fire leaves more than ashes. It leaves light, warmth, and the quiet echo of wings that have flown too close to the heart of eternity. And in that memory, there is peace, not a finality, not a quiet resignation, but a deep, abiding awareness that even in loss there is beauty, that even in the end there is transformation, that even in separation, connection endures. The world is fragile, but it is luminous, and we who walk through it carry a piece of her flame within every step, every breath, every heartbeat. And when we close our eyes, perhaps on a quiet night with the horizon brushed with gold, we may feel the brush of wings above, a warmth against our skin, a soft whisper that says, "Nothing eternal survives unchanged, but everything touched by love endures. Even in absence, even in silence, even in the fleeting moment before dawn, the fire remains, soft, patient, eternal."